All right, so today we are diving deep into LeRoi Jones's black art.
Okay.
And, this isn't exactly a light and fluffy poem.
No.
You sent it over. And I got to say, it's more like a call to action, forged in the fires of the civil rights movement.
Yeah, definitely. It's powerful stuff, and to really understand it, you have to remember the context, It's 1965, the fight for civil rights is in full swing,
Yeah.
and the assassination of Malcolm X just a year before, that weighs heavy on everything.
A heavy year, for sure. So Jones is writing from the heart of all of this turmoil and black art.
Well,
It feels like it's crackling with that raw energy.
yeah. Yeah, it does.
But poetry, can be so open to interpretation.
Mhm.
So what is it that makes this poem more than just words on a page?
Well, for Jones, poetry is not about pretty language or, flowery metaphors for him. It's a weapon, a tool to dismantle oppressive systems.
Mm.
He even says it right out. Poems are bullshit unless, and then he goes on to lay out his vision for what art should be.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
He's coming out swinging right from that first line.
Oh, yeah.
So how does he actually use this poem to fight injustice?
Well, look at those lines about black ladies dying and that incredibly jarring image of brains stuck between Elizabeth Taylor's toes. He's deliberately shocking us, forcing us to confront the brutal reality of black suffering.
Wow.
And he puts it right up against a symbol of white indifference, this Hollywood icon, Elizabeth Taylor.
That is heavy stuff. He's not mincing words, is he? Beauty and violence kind of right there together.
Exactly. He wants to shake us out of our complacency, make us see, these horrors are happening while the world just goes on.
Yeah.
But it's not just the imagery that's radical, The form of the poem, that free verse structure, it's also a rejection of these traditional European poetic forms.
Yeah.
It's like he's visually breaking free from those constraints right on the page.
So the form itself is kind of a rebellion, like echoing the content.
Yeah, you could say that.
But let's get back to those violent metaphors for a second. Poems that shoot guns, poems that wrestle cops into alleys. I mean, it's intense. Is he literally advocating for violence here?
I don't think it's about advocating. It's more about reflecting the violence that has been inflicted upon black communities and turning it back on the oppressor. The dead cops, the tongues pulled out. It's all symbolic, It's about stripping away power, dismantling those systems that perpetuate injustice.
So it's about fighting back, but on a symbolic level, using words as weapons.
Yeah.
Which makes his choice of publication pretty interesting. You mentioned that he publishes in The Liberator, right?
Right.
And that's an abolitionist newspaper, hardly a neutral platform.
Not neutral at all. The Liberator had a long history of, championing social justice, especially when it came to black liberation. By publishing black art there, Jones makes sure that it lands with an audience who's already sympathetic to his message.
So he's choosing his battleground carefully. Imagine the reaction if this poem had appeared in like a mainstream publication back then.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been explosive.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, remember, this is all happening during the height of the Black arts movement, and this poem is like its rallying cry.
Yeah.
This movement was all about reclaiming black identity, celebrating black culture. Black art embodies that spirit perfectly.
So in a way, it's almost like a manifesto laying out the goals and aspirations of the movement.
Precisely. It's a declaration of self-determination, a demand for a world where black voices are heard and black lives are valued. And he makes that so clear in those final lines. We want a black poem and a black world.
Yeah, there's no mistaking his message. Now, this poem is intense, and it comes from a pretty intense mind, right? Tell me a bit about the man behind the words Amiri Baraka.
Well, Amiri Baraka, formerly known as LeRoi Jones, he was a major force in the black arts movement, a poet, a playwright, an activist.
Wow.
His life was just completely intertwined with the fight for black liberation. And that lived experience, it comes through in his work. It's got this raw authenticity you just can't ignore.
He's not just observing from afar. He's right in the thick of it. But I'm curious, this poem is so clearly about the black experience. But does it have anything to say to someone who isn't black?
That's a great question. While black art speaks directly to the black experience in America, its themes of resistance, self-determination, using art as a tool for social change, these are universal.
Right.
It speaks to anyone who has ever felt marginalized or oppressed or silenced.
So even though it's rooted in this very specific historical and cultural context, it has this broader resonance that kind of transcends those boundaries.
Absolutely. That's what makes it such an enduring work of art. It speaks to our shared humanity, our collective desire for justice and equality. But to really understand its impact, we need to look closer at how Jones uses language to create this visceral experience.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What are some of the key things he's doing with language that make this poem so powerful?
Well, first off, there's that bold declarative tone. He's not afraid to make provocative statements to challenge, conventional thinking.
Yeah.
And then there's the vivid, sometimes shocking imagery. He uses strong verbs, concrete nouns, evocative sensory details
Right.
to create this truly immersive experience for the reader.
You're right. It's not just about the ideas, it's about the way those ideas are expressed.
Yeah.
The language itself is a weapon, a tool for creating change.
Exactly. And he's not just using language to describe the world, he's using it to reshape the world.
So we've talked about the historical context, the Black Arts movement,
Yeah.
the power of Jones's voice, the way he uses language to create this visceral experience.
Yeah.
But to really understand Black art, we need to delve into the poem itself line by line. Let's break it down and see how those pieces fit together.
Absolutely. That's where the real magic happens.
Ready to dive in.
Let's do it. Okay, so we're diving into Black art, and you can't ignore that opening line, poems are bullshit unless, it's like a slap in the face, right? It's like he's rejecting everything we think poetry should be.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention. It's like he's saying, forget those flowery sonnets, we're dealing with something real here. But what is he rejecting? What does he want poetry to be instead?
He wants poetry, that's a weapon. A tool for revolution, not decoration. He lays out his vision in those lines that follow, talking about poems that shoot guns, poems that wrestle cops into alleys and take their weapons. This isn't about writing pretty verses. It's about using words to fight for justice.
So he's not just calling for a different kind of poetry. He's calling for a different kind of world, right?
Right.
A world where Black voices have power,
Yeah.
where they're no longer silenced or marginalized.
Exactly. Remember those final lines. We want a Black poem and a Black world.
Yeah.
He's envisioning this future where Black art, Black culture, Black lives, they're at the center,
Yeah.
not relegated to the margins.
Right.
And to get there, he believes art needs to be a force for change, not just a reflection of the status quo.
But some of the imagery he uses to convey that message, it's pretty unsettling. We talked about those lines about Black ladies dying and the brain matter stuck between Elizabeth Taylor's toes.
Yeah.
It's harsh. It's uncomfortable. It feels deliberately provocative. What's he trying to achieve with this kind of imagery?
I think he's deliberately using shock tactics to wake people up, to force them to confront, the brutal realities of racism. By putting the suffering of Black women right next to this image of Elizabeth Taylor, a symbol of white privilege and Hollywood glamour, he's highlighting the stark inequalities that define American society.
So he's saying, look, while you're enjoying your comfortable lives, Black people are dying. And he's not letting anyone off the hook, not even those who might consider themselves allies.
Exactly. He's challenging everyone to take a hard look at themselves and ask, what am I doing to dismantle these systems of oppression? How am I complicit in this injustice?
That's a powerful question, and it's one that still resonates today.
Yeah.
But in the context of the Black Arts movement, what was Jones hoping to achieve with this poem? Was it just about raising awareness, or was he calling for something more concrete?
I think it's about awareness, yes, but it's also a call to action. Remember, the Black Arts movement wasn't just about creating art for art's sake. It was about using art as a tool for social and political change, for reclaiming Black identity and power.
So Black art is like a blueprint for the movement.
Absolutely. It's a manifesto, a declaration of independence, a rallying cry for Black artists to use their creativity to fight for liberation.
And to do that, he's calling for a complete reimagining of what art can be right. He's rejecting traditional forms, embracing raw emotion, using language as a weapon.
Exactly. For Jones, art isn't about aesthetics or entertainment. It's about truth, about justice, about dismantling oppressive systems. And he's challenging Black artists to step into that role, to use their voices to speak truth to power.
Wow. The heavy responsibility, but also an incredibly empowering one. How did this message land with the intended audience? We know it was published in The Liberator, so it's reaching a specific group of people.
Right.
But what kind of impact did it have on the Black community at the time?
It was a lightning rod. Some embraced it as a powerful call to arms, a validation of their anger and frustration. Others saw it as too radical, too violent, too alienating.
So it sparked debate, which is probably what Jones intended, right? He wasn't afraid to push boundaries.
Oh, no, not at all.
To challenge people's assumptions about art and its role in society.
And absolutely. He knew this poem would be controversial, but he also knew it was necessary. He wanted to shake things up to force people to confront the realities of racism and inequality, and he wasn't going to do that by playing it safe.
So this poem, it's more than just like a historical artifact, right? It's a living document that continues to speak to us today. What do you think makes it so enduring? Why does it still resonate with readers decades later?
I think it's that raw honesty, that unwavering commitment to truth and justice. He's not afraid to show the ugly side of racism, to call out hypocrisy and complicity.
Hmm.
And that's something we still need to hear today.
Yeah, we're still grappling with these issues of racial injustice and inequality.
Yeah.
And Black art reminds us that the fight is far from over.
It's a reminder that art can be a powerful weapon in that fight. A tool for raising awareness, challenging assumptions, inspiring change. But it's not just about grand gestures.
Right.
It's about the everyday acts of resistance, the small but significant ways we can challenge injustice in our own lives.
Like choosing to read and engage with a poem like Black art. It's a reminder that knowledge is power
Yes,
and that art can be a catalyst for personal and social transformation.
absolutely. And speaking of personal transformation, I think it's important to note that Jones himself went through a significant evolution throughout his life. His views on race politics art, they shifted and changed over time.
Well, that's interesting. So the Jones who wrote Black art in 1965 is not necessarily the same Jones we see in his later work.
Exactly. He went through different phases, exploring different ideologies and artistic expressions. And that evolution is reflected in his work, which can make studying his writing even more compelling.
It's like peeling back the layers of this complex and multifaceted individual. But even as he evolved, that commitment to social justice, that desire to use art as a tool for change, it remained a constant.
Absolutely. And that's what makes him such a fascinating figure. He was constantly pushing boundaries, challenging himself and his audience to think critically about the world around them.
And Black art is a prime example of that. It's a poem that demands to be read, to be discussed, to be debated.
It's a poem that refuses to be ignored.
Now, we've talked a lot about the poem as a whole, but I think it's time we really dig into the language
Okay.
to dissect those powerful lines and unpack those intricate metaphors.
I'm ready if you are.
All right, let's start with that explosive opening line again. Poems are bullshit, unless. What follows is this list of demands. A vision for what poetry should be in Jones's eyes. It's a radical statement.
Yeah.
A complete rejection of traditional notions of art.
He's not mincing words, is he? He's laying out his manifesto right from the start.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful one. He's not interested in poetry that's just beautiful or pleasing. He wants poetry that's dangerous.
Right.
That challenges the status quo, that fights for justice.
And he's very specific about what that looks like. He talks about poems that knife us, poems that bleed, poems that shoot guns.
Right.
He's using this violent imagery to convey the urgency of the situation, the need for radical action.
Exactly. He's not just talking about writing pretty verses. He's talking about using words as weapons. And he's not afraid to get his hands dirty.
So those metaphors, they're not just literary devices.
No.
They're statements of intent. He's declaring war on injustice, and he's using poetry as his weapon of choice.
And it's a powerful weapon. He's not just attacking individuals. He's attacking systems. He's going after the institutions, the ideologies, the power structures that perpetuate inequality.
So those lines about wrestling cops in alleys, pulling out their tongues, sending them to Ireland, it's all symbolic of dismantling those systems of oppression,
Yeah.
of stripping away their power.
Exactly. He's not literally advocating for violence against individuals. He's talking about dismantling the structures that allow violence and oppression to flourish.
It's about dismantling the systems that dehumanize and marginalize Black people.
Wow.
And he's using this shocking, visceral imagery to make that point clear.
He's not pulling any punches. He wants to shake people out of their complacency, to force them to confront the brutal realities of racism.
But he's not just focused on the negative.
Yeah.
There's also a strong sense of hope and determination in this poem, right?
Absolutely. He's not just talking about destruction. He's talking about creation. He's calling for a Black world where Black art and Black culture can flourish, where Black voices are heard and Black lives are valued.
And that's what makes Black art so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just a poem of protest, it's a poem of hope,
Right.
a vision for a better future.
It's a call to action, a challenge to use our creativity to build a more just and equitable world. But to do that, we need to be willing to confront the ugly realities of the present,
Yeah.
to challenge the systems that perpetuate injustice.
And that's where the power of Black art lies. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what are we doing to make that Black world a reality?
It's a question that we should all be asking ourselves, regardless of our race or background.
Now, we've talked a lot about the themes and ideas in Black art, but I think it's important to take a closer look at the language itself.
Okay.
Jones is a master of using words to create this visceral experience for the reader.
Absolutely. His language is raw, powerful, and often unsettling. He uses strong verbs, concrete nouns, and vivid sensory details to pull you into the heart of the poem.
And that's what makes it so effective. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's an emotional experience.
Exactly. He's not just trying to inform you, he's trying to transform you.
So let's dive into some of those specific lines and see how they work together to create that transformative experience.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, let's start with that line about black ladies dying, a phrase that appears early in the poem and sets a somber tone. What's striking about this line is its simplicity. There's no flowery language, no elaborate metaphors.
Yeah.
It's a stark and brutal statement of fact.
And that's what makes it so powerful. He's not sugarcoating anything. He's presenting the raw reality of Black suffering in a way that's impossible to ignore.
And it's not just a general statement about suffering. He's specifically talking about Black women,
Right.
a group that has historically faced unique forms of oppression and violence.
Exactly. He's centering their experiences, making their voices heard, and he's doing it in a way that's both personal and political.
Now contrast that line with the one that follows. Neon, heart-dripping love of blue neon. Here we see a completely different kind of imagery,
Yeah.
a burst of color and energy that feels almost celebratory.
It's a reminder of the vibrancy and resilience of Black culture, even in the face of oppression. He's showing us that Black life is not just about suffering, it's also about joy, about love, about creativity.
So it's like a moment of light amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope in a world that often feels bleak.
Exactly. And then he brings us back to that darkness with the line, Black people bleeding, reinforcing the reality of the violence and oppression that Black communities face.
So it's constant tension between hope and despair, between resilience and the brutal realities of racism.
Yeah.
And that tension is palpable throughout the poem.
Absolutely. He's not shying away from the complexities of the Black experience. He's showing us the full spectrum, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly.
And he's doing it with a raw honesty that's both unsettling and inspiring.
It's a powerful combination.
Now let's jump ahead to those lines about poems that shoot guns and poems that wrestle cops into alleys and take their weapons, leave them dead with tongues pulled out. This is where the poem takes a sharp turn toward the violent,
Yeah.
the visceral, the downright disturbing.
And yet it's also where the poem becomes most powerful. He's not just talking about the power of words, he's enacting it. He's using language to create a world where oppression is overturned, where the silenced find their voice.
So those lines about dead cops and tongues pulled out, they're not about literal violence.
Right.
They're about symbolic resistance.
Exactly. He's talking about dismantling the systems that allow police brutality and state violence to flourish. He's talking about stripping away the power of those who perpetuate injustice.
And he's doing it in a way that's both shocking and liberating.
Yeah.
He's giving voice to the rage and frustration that many Black people feel. But he's also channeling that anger into a vision for a more just and equitable world.
He's not just complaining about the problem, he's offering a solution. And that solution starts with recognizing the power of art to challenge the status quo, to inspire change, to create a new reality.
It's about using art to dismantle oppressive systems and build a world where Black voices are heard, where Black lives are valued, where Black art is celebrated.
And that's a vision worth fighting for.
Yeah, it really is a vision worth fighting for. But, he doesn't just leave us with a call to action. He gets very specific about the kind of art he thinks can, fuel this revolution.
Oh, yeah. He's not interested in art that just reflects the world, as it is.
Okay.
He wants art that challenges, that disrupts, that transforms art, that's unapologetically Black, that speaks to the unique experiences and aspirations of Black people.
And that's where that phrase Black art comes in. It's not just a title, it's a whole philosophy, right?
Absolutely. For Jones, Black art, it's about more than just aesthetics or entertainment.
Right.
It's about reclaiming Black identity, celebrating Black culture, and using art as a tool for liberation. It's art that is rooted in the Black experience, but also speaks to these universal themes of justice, equality,
Right.
the struggle for human dignity.
So it's both deeply personal and universally relevant. It speaks to those specificities of the Black experience while also addressing these broader human concerns.
Exactly. And that's why Black art continues to resonate with readers today, even those who may not share, Jones's background or experiences.
It's a reminder that the personal is political, that our individual struggles are connected to these larger systems of power and oppression, and that art can be a powerful tool for dismantling those systems.
But it's not just about dismantling systems. It's
Right.
also about building something new, something better. And that's where that vision of a black world comes in.
So black art is not just about destruction, it's about creation, about imagining and building a future where black voices are centered, where black lives are valued, where black culture is celebrated.
Exactly. It's a vision of a world where black people are no longer marginalized or oppressed, where they're free to express themselves fully and to shape their own destiny.
And that's a powerful message, one that resonates with anyone who has ever felt marginalized or silenced.
Yeah, it's a message that speaks to our shared humanity, our collective desire for justice and equality.
But as we've discussed, Jones's vision for black art isn't without controversy.
Sure.
Some people find his language and imagery too aggressive, too confrontational.
That's understandable. He's
Yeah.
not pulling any punches.
Right.
He's deliberately using shocking imagery and language to shake people out of their complacency, to force them to confront the realities of racism and inequality.
And that's not always comfortable, but I think that discomfort is necessary. We can't afford to shy away from these difficult conversations.
I agree. We need to be willing to challenge our assumptions, to confront our biases, to listen to voices that are different from our own.
And black art is a powerful invitation to do just that.
It's a poem that demands our attention, that challenges us to think critically about the world around us, and that inspires us to use our own voices and creativity to fight for a more just and equitable future.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the power and complexity of black art. It's so much more than just a poem. It's a manifesto, a call to action, a vision for a better world.
It's a testament to the enduring power of art to challenge, to inspire, and to transform.
And it's a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing and that we all have a role to play.
Absolutely. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to read black art for yourself. And as you read, ask yourself, what does this poem mean to you? How does it challenge your assumptions about art and its role in society? And how can you use your own voice and creativity to fight for a more just and equitable world?
Those are great questions to consider. And they're questions that go far beyond the scope of this deep dive. They're questions that we should all be asking ourselves every day. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. Art is not a passive activity. It's a form of engagement, a way of making sense of the world around us, and a powerful tool for creating change.
And as Jones so powerfully demonstrates in black art, sometimes that change requires us to be bold, to be uncomfortable, and to use our voices to speak truth to power.
So go out there, engage with art that challenges you, and use your own creativity to make a difference in the world.